Hey everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of this new series. I'm so glad you could join me. Today we're gonna dive into a crucial topic for any serious ASP.NET Core developer: environments. We'll get our project set up and I'll walk you through how environments work, why they're so important, and how you can use them to make your applications more flexible and robust. So let's get right to it. The goals for the very first episode of this series. So our main goals are pretty straightforward. By the end of this episode, you'll understand what environments are in the context of ASP.NET Core. You'll also learn all about the key configuration files: app settings.json, app settings.production, .staging, .development.json, right? And the line settings.json file. So we'll set up, a brand new project together. We'll get our environment-specific configuration ready. And finally, to really hammer it home, we'll build a small demo to show off how environment-based behavior works in a real-world scenario using a service. Let's continue and talk a little bit about environments so that we have at least, a rough idea of what environments are. So think of environments as different contexts your application can run in. ASP.NET Core gives you built-in environments like development, staging, and production. So the whole idea behind this is to let you tailor your application's behavior without changing a single line of production code. So using environments, you can load different configurations. This is a big one. For example, you might use a local database in development, but a real live database in production. You can register different services. So maybe you want to use a mock email service during development to avoid sending real emails, but in production, you use the real deal. Enable or disable debugging and logging. So meaning that you'd want, verbose, detailed logging in development to catch issues, but in production, you dial it back to just show warnings and errors to save on performance and disk space. And change behavior on the fly, meaning that, using different services or features based on where the application is running. And this is really what it's all about. Now let's continue and talk a little bit about, environment lifecycle. So how does ASP.NET Core know, which environment it's running in? Well, it all comes down to a special variable called ASP.NET Core environment, this variable, right? And when the application starts up, it takes a look at this variable and the value inside of this variable to figure out what to do. So let me show you what I mean by this, variable ASP.NET Core environment. You can, first off, you can set this, the value for this variable inside of the, command line. So when you want to run the application, you can set the value of this variable like this. So this basically tells ASP.NET Core, hey, I'm running in the development environment. When ASP.NET Core sees this, it loads your configuration files in a specific order. So take a look at this simple API project. As you can see here, I've got two separate configuration files. So this is something that ASP.NET Core creates for you by default. You've got this base file, and then you've got a specific file for the development environment. And as I said, when ASP.NET Core sees this, right, it's going to load the settings inside of these configuration files in a specific order. First, it starts with the base file, the app settings.json, and next it loads the environment specific file, which is, in this case, would be app settings.development.json. And any settings in this, app settings.development.json file, which is the more specific file, of course, will override the ones in the base file. And then finally, it applies any other configuration sources like, secrets or command line arguments. This cascading behavior is super powerful and gives us, a lot of flexibility. Now, for the, solution, because I wanted to save a little bit of time, I have already created this simple API project. So inside of our solution, which is Fly High Airlines, I have this web API project with ASP.NET Core. And then I haven't done anything else. So I've got, this simple controller out of the box. I've got this, weather forecast type, which we will, of course, delete. But yeah, this is the, basic setup that I have here. So go ahead and create the solution. By the way, if you want to get the full source code, you can get the solution files using the link I have put in the description of this episode. Again, that will allow you to kind of examine the source code at different stages of each episode, because I have created separate branches for each episode. And as you can see here right now, we are on episode 1 branch. Now with this solution set up, I want to move on to the next topic. The most important topic, at least right now for us, is the line settings file. So this is the line settings file. I want to talk about this. I want to really dig into the line settings file so that you understand what it's all about. This file, I guess, is often overlooked, but again, it's absolutely essential for local development. You'll find this, as I showed you, inside the properties folder of your project. So what is this file exactly? It's a configuration file that tells ASP.NET Core how to run your application during development. It's only for local use. It has no effect whatsoever on how your application is deployed. And let's talk about the different fields, the different fields and their values. The first one is schema. So the very first thing that, again, you see here is this schema key. This is a nice little feature that provides IntelliSense and validation for the file in your code editor. Whether you're using Visual Studio, JetBrains Rider, VS Code, it provides IntelliSense. It kind of points to a public JSON schema, which is just a fancy way of saying it tells your editor what fields are available and what their structure should look like. The next field that we've got here is this, IIS settings field. So this entire section is only used when you're launching the app with IIS Express, which is a lightweight web server that comes bundled with Visual Studio. We can break down the fields inside of this, IIS settings. So we've got, Windows authentication set to false currently. So this just, controls whether you want to use Windows credentials, which is often for intranet applications. Then you've got anonymous authentication. This determines if unauthenticated users are allowed to access your app. Then you've got application URL. This is the base HP URL that IIS Express will use. And you've got SSL port. And this is the port for HTTPS. And then we've got this, whole section called profiles, which I guess is the most important thing for us right now. So this is, the thing that we are going to focus on right now, the profile section. Simply put, each profile is essentially a specific launch configuration, right? So you can have multiple profiles and each one defines a different way to run your application. You'll usually see at least a couple of profiles in a new project. When you scaffold a new project, by default, you will get, a couple of profiles out of the box. So the first profile here is the HTTP profile. So this profile is for launching your app over HTTP. Let's take a look at the key fields that this profile has. So the first one is command name. When this is set to project, it kind of simply means that the app will be run using .NET Run from the .NET CLI. Then you've got .NET Run messages. This is a helpful little toggle that shows you useful messages in the terminal window when your app starts up, like, for example, which ports the app is listening on, and so on. Then you've got launch browser, as the name suggests. When set to true, this will automatically open up your browser for you. Then you've got launch URL. This is the URL that gets appended to the base URL. When it's set to Swagger, like in this case, it opens the Swagger UI page, which is great for testing your API. Then you've got application URL. This is the base URL for this profile. And then you've got the environment variables field. So here's the kicker. This is where you explicitly set the ASP.NET Core environment variable for this specific profile. This is how the application knows which app settings file to load. Now let's continue and talk about the next profile, HTTPS, right? So this profile is almost identical to the HTTP, but it's set up for secure local development. The key difference in this profile is the application URL, which has multiple, values, as you can see here, separated by a semicolon. So it supports both HTTP and HTTPS. This is the most common profile you'll use for local development. And the next profile is IIS Express. As you can see here, this profile is used when you launch the application from Visual Studio or choose IIS Express. The command name in this case tells Visual Studio to use the IIS Express web server. The launch URL appends to the application URL that's defined way up in the IIS settings section. This is the, application URL I'm talking about. Now that we understand the, different launch profiles inside of the launch settings file, the next topic would be to talk about, the way these profiles are used. How do you actually, use them? So let me get back to my notes here. I have talked about all of these, profiles, and then I want to talk about, the way these different profiles are used. When you're in Visual Studio, you can just use the drop-down menu next to the green play button to pick up a profile. This is the, drop-down I'm talking about. And as you can see here, you've got your different launch profiles here. So again, in the CLI command line interface, you can specify the profile you want to use with the launch profile flag. So there is this, launch profile argument that you can use in order to run your project from the command line under a certain, launch profile. And I'm going to show you how to do that. Again, remember, all of these profiles are for local development only. They don't affect how your application behaves when it's deployed to a server. Let me scroll down a little bit. This is the way to, choose a launch profile when you're running the application using .NET Run from the command line. Now, let's take a look at this, new launch profile that we want to add. So as you can see here, the name of this launch profile is Fly High API. For our project, we're going to simplify things a bit. So we want to, open the launch settings.json file and make it look like this, or add this launch profile inside of there. This again is a clean profile that we'll use for our local development. I just want to tell you that you can add your customized launch profiles if the ones that ASP.NET Core creates for you automatically don't suffice. So this launch profile explicitly sets the environment to development. Of course, we can change that afterwards. So ASP.NET Core, when the application is launched using this launch profile, will know exactly which configuration to load. Now I'm going to go to the launch settings file, and I can add this to my launch settings.json. And of course, we can, control this. We can set this to development, to staging. I'm talking about the environment variable, to production, and I'm going to show you how to do that in a moment. But before that, let's move on and talk about, the way ASP.NET Core kind of selects a launch profile when you do not explicitly choose one. When you run the application using .NET Run without specifying a profile, the CLI will look at your launch settings file, and it will simply pick the first profile it finds. So if the file is missing, I'm talking about the launch settings file, or if it is empty, it won't use a profile. Again, remember, launch profiles are for local development only. And if the file is missing, as I said, if it is empty, it will just rely on whatever environment variable you have set in your shell. All right, let's turn our attention to the other key configuration files. So app-settings.json and app-settings.development.json. These are the workhorses of your application's configuration. They're used to store all sorts of settings, like, for example, logging levels, database connection strings, API URLs, and custom feature flags. Now, you might ask, why do we have two separate files for our configurations? So it all comes back to our friend, the environment. App settings.json is your base file. This is the base file, the base configuration file. It contains the default settings that will apply to all environments unless they're explicitly overridden. And the app settings.development.json, on the other hand, is specifically for the development environment. So any settings you put in here in this app settings.development.json will override the corresponding settings from the app settings.json when your app is running in development environment. So let's talk about the next topic. How are these files and the settings that we have inside of them get applied? Here's the order in which ASP.NET Core loads configuration. So first the base app settings file. So this file that you can see here. Then the environment specific files. So either production, development, staging, and then any other sources like environment variables, like command line arguments, and so on. If we run the application with this variable set to development, the values from the app settings.development.json will take precedence over those in the base file in the app settings.json. Now, how to change the environment for the different profiles that we have? So there are a few ways to change the environment for your application. The first one would be to modify the launch settings.json file. So this is the easiest way. You just need to edit the value inside of the ASP.NET Core environment field inside of the launch profile you're using. So for example, we could change this from development to staging inside of the fly high API, the launch profile that we added. And then when we run our app, it'll use the staging configuration, for example. The next approach would be to override environment variables on the command line. So again, you can set the environment variable in your shell, but there's a catch. This approach only works if your launch profile doesn't explicitly set the environment variable. If it does, the profile's value will override your shell's value. And the next option, the third option, which is a great way to manage this, is to create multiple profiles for different environments. This is, in my opinion, a bit more robust. So as you can see here, you can easily switch between environments by just specifying the name of the launch profile that you want on the command line. And of course, I have chosen good names for these different launch profiles. And of course, I can continue with my inside of my launch settings file, and then I can add these different launch profiles where I am controlling the value inside of the ASP.NET Core environment variable. This is, as I said, a better way to control the value of this environment variable. So let me continue with my notes now. This is, as I said, a better approach. And then of course, you can run your application from the command line by using .NET Run, and then select the launch profile that you want. Now let's continue and talk about the app settings.json, this file. So again, when you scaffold a project in Visual Studio or VS Code using ASP.NET Core, you get this app settings.json file that looks something like this. So this is a JSON file. It sets a base logging level of information. By the way, if you want to know more about logging, enterprise logging, I have another playlist on the channel. that I highly recommend. Just, go to the different playlists and you can, watch the videos, on that playlist. And I'm sure that they will be very helpful. So with that out of the way, as I was saying, this file sets a base logging level of information, meaning it will show you logs with a level of information or higher. This is something that I have extensively discussed in that other playlist. It also sets, a stricter logging level for ASP.NET Core framework. The minimum log level here is warning. This prevents, the logging system from getting too chatty. And then you've got the allowed hosts, which is a security feature that controls which hosts can access your app. And then we've got this app settings.development.json. This file, which is again created out of the box for you when you scaffold the project using ASP.NET Core, this file again is a little bit different. Here, the default log level is set to debug. Since this file overrides the base one, when you're running in development, your app will log more detailed information, which is super handy for debugging your app. And then the thing that I want to discuss now is how these different files get merged. When your app is running in the development environment, the configuration from both of these files get merged together. And the result is an effective configuration that looks something like this. As you can see, the default log level has been bumped up from information to debug. This is a classic example of how environment-based configuration works. Again, as I said, when you're running in development, the values from the environment-specific file will override the ones that exist in the base file. Now let's continue and talk about the next thing. I want to talk about the fact that you can use these app settings files for other settings. This pattern, again, isn't just for logging. You can use it for anything. For example, you can have different database connection strings for development and production, or you could use feature flags to enable or disable features based on the environment. And as you can see here, we've got, different connection strings for the development and the production environment. Let's go ahead and add some environment-specific configs. So we'll make things a little bit, more interesting. We're going to create a few more files for our project, like app settings.staging and app settings.production. So let me copy this file, paste it here, and do it one more time. So the first one would be app settings.production and app settings.staging. So back to my notes now. Again, 3 different files: development, staging, production, and of course the base file, app settings. Let's go ahead and update some of these files. This is the base configuration file. As you can see, the application name is set to Fly High Airlines, and a new feature X, is disabled by default. So let me go ahead to my app settings file. What I am going to do is to remove all of this code and write the content for my app settings base file. Then I'm going to clean up things. I'm going to remove this, and now we're good to go. And what I want to do now is to update the content of the development file as well. So we've got this other file, app settings.development. In this file, we are going to override 2 things. The application name has been overwritten. We have added a suffix, as you can see here, and we have enabled feature X. This is a great way for kind of letting us know at a glance what environment we're in, and for enabling features that are only meant for testing. So let me go ahead to my development file, and I am going to write the content of this file now. Again, I need to clean things up, save, and we're ready to continue. So yeah, in this file, as I said, we are, overriding two things: the name of the application and the value inside of that, enable feature X. Now let's continue with the next topic. The next topic is how ASP.NET Core merges environment-based files. Now that we have our files set up, we can, use these, and we can, access these settings in our code. But again, before I do that, I want to reiterate that when you're running your application using, the development environment, ASP.NET Core will first load the settings from the base app settings file, and then it will load your settings from that environment, specific file, and then any setting that exists inside of the app settings base file will be overridden by the same settings based on their names, of course, and their hierarchy. They will be overridden by the settings in the environment specific file. Now that we have our file set up, let's see how we can access these settings in our code. We can use the iWeb host environment interface, which is provided by ASP.NET Core's DI container, to check the current environment name. So let's add a small endpoint to our program.cs and then run the API to see if we can get the name of the environment. So I'm going to get to my program.cs, and after I use the authorization, I am going to create this endpoint. So it's going to be a GET request to the root of the application, and then I'm going to return the name of the environment. And in my HTTP file, I have already created this endpoint. I'm going to remove this. I have already created this endpoint, and the port number is going to be 5001 HTTPS, which is of course coming from the first profile that we have defined here. And remember that we are using the staging environment right now. So let me stop the application and run it one more time without specifying a launch profile, which means that the first launch profile is going to be picked up by default, and then I am going to send that request. And as you can see, in the output, we get the environment, which has been set to staging. Now let's continue with the notes. We can also take a look at another example where we are, getting our app name from our builder.configuration, and then we specify, the key that we want, or the name of the field. So application name, and of course this colon, right, means it is used for controlling the hierarchy. So application colon name goes to our app settings, and we'll get the value of this field, which is Fly High Airlines by default. But of course in the staging environment we can adjust that. We don't have it here in the production, we don't have it, but in the dev we do have it. So what I'm going to do is inside of the line settings file, I'm going to change this to development, so that the first launch profile is going to use the development environment. And then I am going to go to my program.cs and write the code here. So let's create the app name variable, and then we can change this app map get endpoint to something like this, where we are getting not only the environment but also the application's name, and then we are returning that. So again, I'm going to save everything. I'm going to stop the API, run it again, go to my HP file, send this request one more time, And as you can see, I'm getting the name of the application coming from the app settings.dev, the development environment, and then the name, and then the environment is of course development. Now let's get to the notes and continue with the next topic. So now let's talk about the next topic, which is using the options pattern. The thing is, using string-based keys to get some configuration from our, config files can be a bit error-prone. A much better way would be to handle this using the options pattern. So it's a standard way to work with configuration in a safe and a strongly typed way. What we are going to do is to create a simple class that represents our application settings, and we'll call it application settings for now. This is just a plain old C# class with properties that match the keys in our JSON configuration. So let me go ahead and add this code file. I'm going to create a simple class quickly, and then I'm going to create my application settings file with the properties whose name match the name of the fields inside of my app config files. And then I'm going to rename the file to app settings. Now let's get to the notes again. And then the next thing would be to do the binding. So basically in program.cs, we'll tell the dependency injection container to bind our application section to this new class. So basically this line of code does all the heavy lifting for us. It finds the application section in our configuration and maps it to an instance of this type, application settings. It then registers this instance in the DI container as iOptions of application settings, and then we will be able to inject it inside of our controller. So let me go ahead to my program.cs, and I am going to register this here. So I'm gonna create this binding, and then inside of my controller, in my weather forecast controller, I'm going to rename this file, by the way. I'm going to create a controller, a simple API controller. So the name of the controller would be info controller, and then we are going to inject a dependency of type iOptions of application settings, and then the DI container will map the correct section from our app settings file to these application settings. Still, we are using the first launch profile, as you can see here, and the environment has been set to development. Before I test this, I want to talk about the benefits of doing this piece of code. So again, why would we want to use the options pattern? As I said, this is a much better approach because it gives you a strong typing and IntelliSense, so no more messing with string keys. It's also much safer for refactoring, and it centralizes your configuration, making it easy to access anywhere, and to access your configuration anywhere you need it. Now, what I want to do is to create, another request here. So I'm going to copy this, paste it, and then I am going to send a GET request to info. The name of the controller is info. Let me rename the code file as well. So I'm going to rename my code file to info controller, and then I'm going to send a GET request to get the settings value, right? And as you can see inside of our development environment, I guess we changed this to development, right? Yeah, the environment is development. So inside of the development, we will have the application section with name and enable feature X, which is going to be mapped to this an instance of this type, and then we can read the different properties of this. So let me save everything, stop the API, run it one more time, and then get to the HP file, send this new request, and as you can see, we are getting the value. So this endpoint is returning the value, and of course this is something that we can extend. We will do that. We will, extend this further in future episodes and also in this one. Let me take you one more time to my notes file. Now, what I want to point out before we wrap up this episode is that, if you change a value in your app settings file, as things stand right now, you have to restart your application for those changes to take effect. And that's a pain during development. So if, for example, I change the name of the application to something else, the application, while it's running, will not pick up, those changes until you restart the application. But we can fix that. We can kind of enable live configuration reloading. And I have talked about this here. There are a couple of things that we need to do. First, we need to tell the application to watch our configuration files for changes. We can do that by explicitly, configuring our web application builder. I'm going to go to program.cs and let me comment out this line of code. And then I am going to, configure my host to explicitly, direct the host to kind of watch for changes in the app settings file. And I want to, comment out this line of code as well. I'm going to remove it later in the future episodes. I'm going to keep it here for your reference. And now let's get back to the notes. So as I told you, this line of code, allows us to load the different JSON files that we have. And of course, we're, setting this flag called reload on change to true. Now, the next, thing that we would need to do is to use iApplication snapshot instead of iOptions. So kind of to take, full advantage of this live reloading thing, we need to use this, type, this interface instead of the iOptions of T in our controller. So as you can see, we have a dependency on this now, and then we are, creating another endpoint. So what I am going to do is to go to my info controller. I'm not going to remove the, code from here. I'm going to comment this out. I'm going to remove it in the next episode. But I want to commit the changes to this, branch so that when you get the code, you can, take a look at the previous version of this controller as well. And remember, to get the code, you can, use the link that I have put in the description of this episode. So let me now create my, new version of this info controller and the endpoint. So it's very similar to the previous version. The only difference is that right now we are using this new type, iOptions snapshot, and this would give us a live reload. This iOptions snapshot interface kind of ensures that for each request, a fresh copy of the configuration is loaded if the file has changed. Now we are going to run our application, hit this endpoint, change a value inside of our app settings file or our app settings, development file, and hit the endpoint again, and boom, you'll see that the new value will be, available without us needing to restart the application. I'm going to save everything, stop the video, stop the API. Now send a request to the controller. We're getting feature X enabled true because we're using the development environment. Now if I change this to false, save everything, send the request again, I get false here. So we've got, live reloading enabled. And that's a wrap for this episode. In the next episode, we will be building on these concepts, and we want to, start working with some services. And make sure you stay around. If you enjoyed watching the video, make sure you give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing to the channel, and I can't wait to see you in the next episode.